In recent years, something subtle but significant has been changing on the streets of Brazil. In cities like São Paulo, Rio de Janeiro, and Salvador, electric cars are no longer rare sightings. They appear quietly in traffic, at charging stations in shopping centres, and in newly opened showrooms. What makes this shift truly interesting is not simply that Brazil is beginning to adopt electric vehicles, but who is driving this transition. It is not American automakers. It is not European luxury brands. It is China. Companies like BYD, Great Wall Motors, and Chery are rapidly expanding their presence in Brazil. They are not only exporting vehicles but also investing directly, building factories, creating supply chains, and offering prices that undercut Western competitors by a wide margin. To many observers, this may seem like a straightforward story of market competition. Chinese electric vehicles are cheaper, Brazil is buying them, and that is the end of the story. But for Brazil, this moment cannot be understood in isolation. To fully grasp what is happening today, we need to step back more than 50 years, to a time when Brazil faced a very different kind of energy crisis, one that left a lasting imprint on how the country responds to external pressure. In the early 1970s, Brazil was an ambitious, fast-growing nation, but it had a critical vulnerability. More than 80% of its oil was imported. Economic growth, industrialization, and transportation all depended on a steady flow of foreign energy. When the global oil crisis erupted in 1973, triggered by the OPEC embargo, that dependence became painfully clear. Oil prices soared, supply became uncertain, and Brazil's economy was suddenly exposed to forces far beyond its control. Inflation surged, trade deficits widened, and the cost of development rose sharply. For a developing country, this was not merely an economic inconvenience, it was a strategic threat. Energy insecurity meant political vulnerability. It meant that decisions made in distant capitals could directly shape Brazil's domestic future. Faced with this reality, Brazil did something unusual. Instead of waiting for global markets to stabilize or for external partners to provide relief, the government chose to pursue a radical domestic solution. In 1975, it launched the Proálcool program, a national effort to replace gasoline with bioethanol produced from sugarcane. The choice of sugarcane was no accident. Brazil had centuries of experience cultivating it. The climate was ideal, the land was abundant, and the agricultural sector was already deeply integrated into the national economy. More importantly, sugarcane represented something oil did not: control. Ethanol could be produced domestically, scaled internally, and refined without reliance on foreign suppliers. Through heavy subsidies, industrial coordination, and long-term planning, Brazil pushed its automotive sector to adapt. Car makers were encouraged, and at times pressured, to develop vehicles capable of running on ethanol. Over time, this effort produced a uniquely Brazilian innovation: flex fuel technology, allowing cars to operate on gasoline, ethanol, or any mixture of the two. What began as an emergency response to a global crisis evolved into a structural transformation. Brazil became a world leader in bioenergy. Entire regions of the country were reshaped by the sugarcane industry. Millions of jobs were created, and Brazil achieved a level of energy diversification that few countries could match. The deeper lesson of Proálcool was not just technological, it was political and strategic. Under external pressure, Brazil chose innovation over dependency. The crisis forced the country to imagine alternatives, and sustained policy commitment turned those alternatives into lasting institutions. Fast forward to the present, and Brazil once again finds itself at a crossroads, shaped by forces largely beyond its borders. Today, the pressure is not an oil embargo, but climate change. Global emissions targets, environmental regulations, and shifting consumer expectations are transforming the automotive industry worldwide. Internal combustion engines, once the symbol of modern mobility, are increasingly seen as obsolete. Brazil's energy matrix places it in a relatively favorable position. Unlike many large economies, the majority of its electricity already comes from renewable sources, including hydropower, bioenergy, wind, and solar. In theory, this makes Brazil an ideal candidate for electric mobility. Charging an electric vehicle in Brazil produces far fewer emissions than in countries where electricity still comes primarily from coal or gas. Yet transportation remains a weak link. Cars, trucks and buses still rely heavily on liquid fuels. Bioethanol mitigates some emissions, but it does not fully align with the global push toward electrification. This is where China enters the picture. Chinese automakers approach Brazil with a strategy shaped by their experience in other emerging markets. Rather than positioning electric vehicles as luxury products, they offered practical models designed for urban use. Instead of relying solely on exports, they invested directly in local manufacturing. BYD's decision to build a factory in Bahia, on the site of a former Ford plant, was more than a business move. It was a statement. The message was clear. China was not just selling cars, it was embedding itself in Brazil's industrial future. The Brazilian government responded positively. Tax incentives, environmental commitments, and industrial policies aligned to encourage electrification. Electric vehicles were framed not only as tools for emission reduction, but as symbols of modernization and technological progress. At first glance, this may look like a clean break from the past. Electric vehicles represent a new era, powered by batteries rather than fuel. But when viewed through a historical lens, the pattern is strikingly familiar. In the 1970s, Brazil faced geopolitical pressure through oil markets and responded by developing bioethanol. In the 2020s, Brazil faces environmental and technological pressure and responds by embracing electric vehicles. In both cases, external forces forced internal adaptation. In both cases, energy diversification became a strategic priority. The crucial difference lies in where innovation originates. Proálcool was largely a domestic project. While it involved foreign technology and collaboration, the core value chain was built inside Brazil. Sugarcane fields, ethanol refineries, and flex fuel expertise were Brazilian assets. Electric vehicles, by contrast, are driven by technologies Brazil does not fully control. Batteries, semiconductors, and critical minerals are concentrated in global supply chains dominated by China. While EVs reduce oil dependence, they risk creating a new form of reliance, one rooted in technology rather than fuel. This raises difficult questions about energy security in the 21st century. Is Brazil exchanging one vulnerability for another? Or can it leverage this transition to build its own industrial capabilities, just as it did with bioethanol? The future of Brazil's bioethanol industry is central to this debate. Far from being obsolete, ethanol could play a complementary role in a hybrid transition. Electric hybrid vehicles powered partly by biofuels, electricity generated from biomass, and integrated energy systems offer pathways that preserve existing industries while embracing new technologies. The challenge lies in policy coherence. Without long-term planning, electrification could undermine decades of investment in bioenergy. With strategic coordination, however, Brazil could create a uniquely diversified mobility model, blending electricity and biofuels in ways few countries can replicate. There is also a broader geopolitical dimension. China's growing role in Brazil's automotive sector reflects a larger shift in global power. Within the BRICS framework, Brazil and China present themselves as partners in reshaping development models for the global south. China brings capital, technology and manufacturing scale. Brazil offers markets, resources and political legitimacy. This relationship is neither purely exploitative nor entirely symmetrical, it is pragmatic, and its outcome will depend less on Beijing's intentions than on Brasilia's choices. History suggests that Brazil performs best when it treats external pressure as a catalyst rather than a constraint. Proálcool succeeded not because of crisis alone, but because of sustained commitment, institutional learning, and adaptation over time. Today, electric vehicles from China offer Brazil a similar test. They can become the foundation of a green industrial transformation, or they can remain imported solutions with limited domestic spillovers. Brazil has the advantage of experience. It has navigated energy shocks before. It has proven that innovation can emerge from necessity. The question now is whether that lesson still guides policy. The future of Brazilian mobility will not be decided solely by market prices or technological trends. It will be shaped by strategic choices about autonomy, integration, and long-term resilience. Electric vehicles may be new, but the dilemma they present is deeply familiar. Once again, Brazil stands at a moment where global forces demand a response. And as history has shown, the most important question is not where the pressure comes from, but what Brazil chooses to build in response to it.